It is indeed the most wonderful time of the year. You could argue Thursday might be the best day in the entire sports calendar. This is the 13 on your side March Madness special. I have the 4 smartest people I know: Matt Gard, Stephen Bohner, Maddie Monroe, Blake Hansen, and then the smartest one, myself.
Ooh.
Guys, a very exciting week. March Madness getting underway. We have to start with Michigan. Spartan fans,
yes.
Spartan graduates, we're not going to start with Michigan State. We'll get to them. Michigan, a 5 seed. Coming into Thursday night, they're going to take on UC San Diego. In my opinion, Michigan should not have been a 5 seed. They won the Big Ten. Somehow they are behind Purdue, who's a 4 seed, Wisconsin, who's a 3 seed. We can get into that, but that doesn't matter anymore. The committee picked. Blake, I'm going to start with you. What do you like out of Michigan's draw? What do you not like out of Michigan's draw? Having to be in Denver, do you see them getting out and playing next weekend?
You know, being out in Denver obviously is a disadvantage for Michigan in some regards. Now, they travel very well, their fans, so I don't think that it'll be a total negative on their end. But in terms of the seeding, UC San Diego is a very popular upset pick. They are fundamentally strong. They all can shoot from the perimeter. And here's the one stat. They are big on getting turnovers on defense. And what does Michigan struggle with? Turning over the ball. So obviously this is a pretty popular upset pick. But I do have Michigan winning this game.
Okay.
Just because if there's one thing UC San Diego lacks, it's size. And what does Michigan have? 2 7-footers, and I think that they'll use that to their advantage.
So that's going to make a lot of people happy that Michigan's at least winning a game. Now we're going to go to these two who are going to make people not happy. Maddie, why is Michigan not going to win on Thursday night?
UC San Diego is coming in off a 15-game winning streak, and so I think they're feeling hot. They're ready to go. I don't think Michigan has the same energy coming into this game. They did just win the Big Ten, but I don't think that's enough to push it over the edge. I think that San Diego's got this one.
Stephen, you also have Michigan losing on Thursday night.
Yes, I do. But I will say that also Michigan is one of those coin flip teams. I feel like they could make a run or they could lose in the first round. But I do have them losing the first round. And like Blake said, it is because of the turnovers. It is because of the fact that they have this quick turnaround for the Big Ten tournament. They're also playing at high altitude. They're playing super late at night.
Don't overlook the altitude.
Right? Exactly. Also, I love Dusty May. I think Dusty May has done a fantastic job for him. And I think if he gets past this first game, he showed in the Big Ten tournament that he can turn around and he can coach the team to the next round and the next round. So I do have Michigan losing in this first round. I think it's going to be a really tight one. But if they do make it out of this round, I do believe they'll make it to the next weekend.
Matt, you are. We have a Michigan advancing to not Michigan advancing. You're the tiebreaker over there in the corner.
I think San Diego wins this one, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to hearken back to something that Blake said. You got the bigs going for Michigan. That's your advantage. But bigs are consistently an advantage for the Big Ten. And where has it gotten the Big Ten, Spartans fans? In the last 25 years, the Big Ten has not produced a national champion. So I think if you're riding on your bigs, you're not going to win. This is a tournament that is about shooters, and I think UC San Diego's got this one.
Michigan, like you guys mentioned, 10 o'clock on Thursday night, so get your coffee ready. That's going to be a late one in Denver. I have Michigan winning, but then losing to Texas A&M. I'll talk a little bit more about the Aggies. I have them in my Final Four. But then, speaking of 10 o'clock games, Friday night. I don't know what we did to deserve this. A Thursday night game with Michigan at 10 o'clock. Friday night, Michigan State playing at 10 o'clock. I love Michigan State's draw. They get Bryant in the first round. The America East winners. The America East, of course, not one of the better conferences in the country. Matt will go the other way. Michigan State's going to win Thursday night. How far do you have the Spartans going? 2-seeded
Let's
Spartans.
see. I've got them going to the Elite Eight and losing to Auburn. I think they're a good ball team. Unfortunately, they're going to run into a buzzsaw with the Auburn Tigers, and but you never know. It's Tom Izzo. Never underestimate that guy, and we'll see what the Spartans can do.
Try to be balanced, you two over here. Michigan State, they're going to get Bryant in the first round. They're going to win that game. How far do you see this team going? They're one of the deeper teams in the tournament, which is huge this time of year.
Michigan State is our national champion. Right now I'm saying it. 100%. You got Izzo. The dude is 23-8 in second games of every weekend in the NCAA tournament. Beats out anyone else's record by far. They're 5th in the nation in adjusted efficiency, adjusted defensive efficiency, 27th in the nation in offensive efficiency, 3rd in the nation in rebounding, 3rd in the nation in rebounding rate, 20th in the nation free throw percentage. This is an old school Izzo team. 10 players play 10 or more minutes.
Yeah.
I hope one of them doesn't for the tournament. His name's Booker. But anyway, I think this team has nothing but upside to it. I think their deepness, they're able to wear out teams. I think they're finally starting to hit threes, which is insane because this team was winning these tough battles all season long with below 30% three-point percentage. So I think they're peaking right now.
I'm going to stop you real quick
Okay.
because no team has ever won the national championship ever shooting under 29% from three-point land. Michigan State just got to 30.
Just barely got to 30. And all of their losses this season combined for 31-point differential over 6 games, including that game against Wisconsin in the Big Ten tournament. And that could have been avoided too because of maybe a technical foul, but we'll leave it at that, Mr. Holloman. But anyway, this team is just so deep, so electric, and they finally have a go-to guy late in the season. Jace Richardson, he's going to be a lottery pick. He's averaging above 17 points a game over the last 7 games. They have their go-to guy now. They're solid. They're locked in. They have an easy bracket, I think, one of the easiest ones in the South. So I think they're going to get out of there, and then their hardest challenge is going to be Florida in the Final Four, I think.
Maddie, do you also have Michigan State as your national champion?
I
Because
do
I wouldn't
not.
be shocked.
I love my Sparties, but I have to agree with Matt on this one. I see them going to Elite Eight and then not beating Auburn. I think that Auburn has a really great team this year. I don't think that Michigan State is better, although I wish I could say that. I think Michigan State has had a great run. I agree with Steven that they're on the up, but I don't think the energy is going to take them to a national championship.
I have Michigan State going to the Final Four. I do want to say something about this first round game. They are going to win, I think, against Bryant. They obviously should. But Bryant does play a fast-paced offense. And the only concern there is that with Michigan State's struggles at time offensively, and you start getting into a close game, you feed off the crowd, the underdog. Again, I'm saying that is a very low chance of happening, but it is something just to be mindful of. Again, I agree completely with Steven. They are hitting their stride. They are balanced. They can go deep on the bench. That negates any foul trouble. Trey Holloman is unbelievable. And then you talk about Jace Richardson, and he's just been a rising star over the course of this season. I do have Michigan State in the Final Four, but not facing Auburn at all in this tournament because I have Auburn losing before the first weekend is over to Louisville.
All right. So
Because I think Auburn has struggled down the stretch, and I know you are an SEC grad. I have seen this with the Big Ten many times in many tournaments. I think the SEC will falter a little bit in this tournament just because they've had a hard regular season. And we've seen this with the Big Ten before. Oh, the Big Ten's very tough. And then by the end of the first weekend, half the teams are out. I just think that the SEC will have some struggles at some points of this tournament. So I do have them getting to the Final Four, but losing to Florida in that Final Four matchup.
to get to the Final Four, to get to the national championship, you have to be pretty consistent throughout. With Michigan State was, for the most part this season, they threw up a couple duds here and there against Indiana, a little bit on the West Coast. We'll toss that up to, first time going to UCLA, USC as part of conference play. Matt, do you worry, having seen your Indiana Hoosiers kind of be one of those duds that Michigan State played, that Michigan State could bring one of those duds back during the course of a 4-game run, a 5-game run here, where you need to be on your game every single time out?
Well, you got to be on your game every single time out, no matter what. You got to ask yourself this question: who's playing inspired? Because that Indiana Hoosiers team that was playing Michigan State that night and got that upset, not only were they playing for their head coach Mike Woodson, who is now gone, but also they were playing for Bobby Knight's record, just holding off one more day. They didn't want Tom Izzo to get the record for most wins against Indiana. So, who is the most inspired team? Who's got the juice? Maybe that's McNeese State with their manager.
You're getting ahead of me with my bracket, but all right.
Yeah.
I have one more thing with Michigan State. I do think them losing to Wisconsin in the semifinals could have been a blessing in disguise.
I agree.
Obviously, you brought up the technical foul. They were a little hot-headed in that game, a little off of what is usually a very sturdy Tom Izzo type of team. And I think this will get them back to center and kind of wake up and realize that, okay, it's the tournament now. There's no more games to be played. Let's do what we do best, and that's winning basketball games, what they've shown all year long.
And we're going to see with Michigan, they played 3 games in a row. Wisconsin, who's a 3 seed, a lot of people have them going decently far. They just played 4 games in a row. So how is that going to fare come tournament time? Steven, you're the only one that has them beating Auburn, right? Am I correct?
Yes, I believe so.
And hopefully we're still talking about that as a potential matchup next week. Why can the Spartans beat Auburn in the Sweet 16, the #1 seed in the entire tournament?
Right. Well, I believe they can beat Auburn for a few different reasons. One, it's just their depth. Their depth, their grit, and I hate saying
the
that.
depth is
grit,
it's going to be huge this time of year.
Yeah,
it is.
This and just Tom Izzo too. So you have such depth that when you look at the second half of Spartans over the last 12 games or so, they consistently beat out the team in the second half, usually shutting them down almost completely in the last 5 minutes or so. So I think come tournament time, all these teams are already going to be a little bit tired. They're already going to be a little bit, off just from being in the tournament. So I think that is going to be a huge motivator for the Spartans and be able to get them over the top. Also, as long as they're hitting threes, like I said before, and they are putting up above 30%, I think this team, when you start stretching them out, because they have such a good game in the paint with Kohler and Carson Cooper's been playing defensively out of his mind the last several games. Everything is coming together. The only thing that's been fading off is Booker, and Zapala hasn't been doing that great either. So if those guys can just play average and the rest of the team can play slightly above average, I think it's no contest.
Yeah, I think if they're offensively just average compared to where they've been all season long, it's going to be a very tough team to beat in the tournament. It just comes down to how they shoot the ball, and I know we can say that's about any team, but defensively they just play so good.
Exactly.
And they just wear teams out in that second half. So just make your threes when it's needed.
They're going to get the winner of Marquette, New Mexico State in the second round. Everybody here has them going to the Sweet 16. But, it's not called March Madness for nothing. The last 16 years, a double-digit seed has made it to the Sweet 16 every year. So, Maddie, who's going to be that team this year? Looking a little bit more at the whole landscape of the bracket, who is your upset team to at least get through the first weekend that's gonna shock some people?
Yeah, Jacob, I don't think you're going to like this answer, but I think that Drake has one of the best defensive teams right now, and I know you love your Mizzou, but I think that they're really going to
Your bracket's 0 for 1 already. Sorry, man.
I think that they're really going to give Mizzou a run for their money on offense, and it's going to be a tough team to beat.
Absolutely. Steven, who is going to be in next weekend? Who's going to be in the Sweet 16 that we're sitting here talking about saying, I can't believe that team won 2 games?
So I think it's not a double-digit seed, but I think Gonzaga is going to continue their Sweet 16 run. This is probably the most consistent college basketball team over the last 10 years. Them, Kansas, and Michigan State are the 3. 10 straight Sweet 16s, and you're in a mid-major conference. You're not even in one of the big conferences, and you're consistently doing this. These guys have won 9 out of the last 10 games, 5 of those by more than 20. They're going to make a run again. They're going to make it to Sweet 16, possibly even the Elite 8.
Matt, who is going to be our surpriser for the Sweet 16?
I'm going to give you an indecisive answer because I have 2 teams on my mind. The East region.
So Steven didn't listen, and he didn't do a double seed. You're
I have a double seed.
indecisive.
I have a
Nobody's
double
following
seed.
the rules.
No. So Sweet 16, I have VCU versus St. Mary's, and I think St. Mary's is going to get past Bama. Bama has been struggling the last few weeks. I just have a good feeling about VCU, and so whoever wins that Sweet 16 game, maybe they go up against Duke. Maybe Cooper Flagg's back. Maybe he's not. You could be looking at a Final Four team out of one of those teams.
Right, and Blake, I know your bracket gets a little funky. who do you like as the Cinderella, quote unquote?
I really do like Colorado State. They're the 12 seed against Memphis. I'm not big on Memphis. I think Penny Hardaway, while he's a good coach, they have struggled over the last several years. Colorado State has been very, very good down the stretch. I can't off the top of my head how many games they've run, but they have been on quite the winning streak down the stretch. They dominated the Mountain West tournament, and I really like their matchup against Memphis in the first round, and then they would face the winner of Maryland and Grand Canyon. I do not think Maryland deserves all the hype they get. They don't have any depth whatsoever, and again, I think that Colorado State is going to make a little bit of a run into the Sweet 16. If there's one other team that I'm keeping an eye on, you always have to watch out for these play-in games with the 6 versus 11 seed. And if Xavier beats Texas, I have a very weird feeling that Xavier is going to be a team that not only beats Illinois. Illinois has been up and down all year, but I think they can beat the winner of Kentucky and Troy, which would probably be Kentucky. But again, those are the two teams I'm kind of looking at, just because from a historic standpoint, those 6-11 matchups, the play-in games, one of those teams, usually the 11 seed that wins, does make a run.
Sparty was on the wrong side of that once.
Yes.
So if you want to win your March Madness bracket pool, first round, second round, not as important, even though it might seem. You have to get your Final Four correct. Not all 4, but 2, 3 if you want to be there at the top. Stephen, we'll start with you. Who's going to come out of each region? Who do you have in that Final Four? Did you get a little crazy? Is it more 1s and 2s?
It's all 1s and 2s.
What did you like?
Okay. So in the South, we got Michigan State, obviously. They're going to be a national champion. In the West, we have Florida. I think Florida has just...
It's hard to pick against them at this point.
Exactly. And even then, I think the Florida-Michigan State game is going to be a coin flip, essentially, but I still have Michigan State. In the East, I have Duke. I think Duke... Cooper Flagg is supposed to be back, and I do believe that they are going to make a run just by when you were looking at some of these games outside of their conference, just like complete blowouts. They destroyed Illinois. And Illinois put up numbers against a bunch of teams in the Big Ten that are ranked pretty high. So I think Duke's going to be able to make it out. And then Tennessee out of the Midwest. I think the Bulls are
I love Tennessee.
Yeah, they're looking really good right now, really hot. And I think it's going to end up being Michigan State and Tennessee, 2 number 2 seeds, with Michigan State taking it.
Is that what I have? Almost. All right, that is a solid 4. Matt, same type of thing, 1s and 2s.
I have
Did you feel a little crazy?
3 1s and 1 3. I've got Auburn, as I said, Texas Tech coming out of the West, Duke coming out of the East, Houston coming out of the Midwest, and Houston winning the whole thing. Now, if you want to win your bracket pool and you live in Michigan and you have specifically an office pool, now, an office pool is important. I'm looking right into the camera. This is the best advice you're going to get. The office pool is not full of sports heads, okay? So automatically, half of the people in your office are going to pick Michigan or Michigan State, like my friend Steve here. Now, Steve knows ball, but not everybody in your office knows ball. So if you pick a Final Four and Michigan State are not in it, you are playing the odds to win. Because as soon as one of those teams loses, as soon as both of those teams lose, more than half of your office pool is gone. So that is my hot advice.
I love it. I was honestly going to finish this with asking your biggest advice for filling out your bracket.
That's
You
it.
That's
you gave
You
it.
can skip me.
That is pretty solid. Blake, who's in your Final Four?
So in the South region is Michigan State. I have them beating Louisville in that Elite 8 matchup. In the West, it's Florida. I think Florida is the best team all around. They've been consistent all year long. They can score. They can play defense. They're just what you want in a national champion team. In the East, it's Duke. Duke, even with Cooper Flagg out, they dominated the tournament, their conference tournament. I just don't see any of these teams coming to the degree of Duke. And in the Midwest, because I'm not going to pick all 1s and 2s here, because that generally doesn't happen many years. There's always a lower seed that kind of sneaks in. I'm going with the Clemson Tigers to go into the final.
A 5 seed.
A 5 seed. Clemson's defensive and offensive efficiency is very much in the top 50 on both regards. And I think Houston, again, that Houston-Gonzaga matchup, I have Houston winning as of now. but I could easily see Gonzaga winning that matchup. I think Clemson could beat Gonzaga, and then I don't think that Tennessee is going to make it to a Final Four just because
You're scared. You're scared of what they've done in the past.
I have been burned by Tennessee in the past. My worry with them is just like Houston. They struggle to score at varying times, and while they can lock down on defense like no other, you need to shoot the ball when it comes down to March Madness, and it takes one hot team that can shoot the ball, and Tennessee is trying to change how they play games, and that's not a good recipe in March Madness if you're trying to change how you play in the middle of a game. And that's what worries me with Tennessee. But I'm going Clemson, Duke on the one side, Michigan State, Florida on the other side. I have Florida versus Duke in my final, with Florida winning it all.
All right, Maddie, what do you got? Give us your 4.
Nothing crazy here. 1s and 2s. I've got Auburn, as we kind of already talked about. Florida, which I think we all kind of agree on. Duke, as we said already, Cooper Flagg's ankle makes me a little nervous, but I think it's not going to matter at the end of the day. And then I've got Tennessee in the Midwest. And I know Houston is kind of the favorite for that region, but I think Tennessee is going to give them a run for their money.
Sounds like you guys like the SEC. I have 3 SEC teams as well: A&M, Florida, Tennessee. Duke's the outlier. Duke's going to win the whole thing. They can win it without Cooper Flagg if he doesn't play a single game in the tournament. But we're going to wrap up with this because we all watch college basketball. The chances any of us win our bracket pool, unlikely. It's going to be the person that closes their eyes, favorite color, favorite mascot that goes on to win. But Blake, what is your biggest advice for filling out your bracket?
I think the biggest advice, have fun in the first round. Don't be afraid to have an upset here and there. As you mentioned earlier, when it comes down to these office pools or tournament picks, it comes down to having your Final Four teams and your national champion remaining. If you lose your Final Four team, and especially your national championship team, you're not going to win. So I think when it comes down to actually picking the winner, you've got to go down to the teams that offensively and defensively are efficient all year long. One of the statistics out there is, from the Ken Pom ratings, if they're in the top 40 or 50, what is it? Something along.
There it is. 95.7% of national champions have had a top 22 Ken Pom offense, top 32 Ken Pom defense.
Yeah.
Auburn, Duke, Florida, Texas Tech, Gonzaga, Houston, Wisconsin, Arizona, Iowa State, Clemson.
Yeah.
Those are the teams that fall in that this year.
Yeah, and I think it comes down.
No Michigan State.
No Michigan State. I think it just comes
Right
down.
outside there. Right outside of it.
I didn't make the rules. I'm just reading the paper.
Last thing is that, obviously, any given year, things can happen, and statistics don't mean anything when, you get to the hardwood. But, I think it's just, you got to look at how these teams have fared in the past, and we have a set 7-8 teams that line up with that metric, and I think you should stick with those 8 teams. One last stat, and I know I don't want to talk too long here, is that for Michigan State and St. John's, both teams were unranked at the beginning of the year. Any team that was unranked at the beginning of the year that is a 1 or 2 seed generally does not fare well in the tournament. In fact, a lot of those times, the team doesn't make it out of the first weekend. I don't want to put bad mojo on the Spartans.
To add specifically to that, no number 2 seed that was not ranked or preseasonally ranked has made it to the Final Four.
Yeah.
So Michigan State would be making history this year if that happens.
And St. John's, I just don't like the Big East.
Yeah,
I don't like
I actually have Arkansas beating St. John's, or I take that back. I have Texas Tech beating St. John's to get to the Elite Eight.
Okay, Maddie, biggest advice for filling out your bracket?
I would say I rarely win. Rarely do
I feel like that might be the case. Does
So-
anybody here ever win? I mean, who are these people listening
Once.
to? I don't know.
Yeah. So I don't know that I can give the best advice,
Yeah.
given that I rarely win. But I would say, find teams that you are excited about, that you want to go with, and you want to see make it to the Final Four. And if they do, then it's even more fun for you. That would be my best advice, I'd say.
Steven, you wrote a great article at 13onyourside.com, but if you could take one thing away from your bracket advice, what you would put in there, what would you say is your number one thing?
I would have to say it is to not go too upset heavy. So average number of upsets since 1985, when it expanded to a field of 64, is 8.5. The last few years, we've had a couple of outliers in the, I think, 12 and 14, the number of upsets, but that's pretty rare. So I would say for this year's, try to stick around 10, maybe even a little bit less than 10. But I do think that this year will be kind of telling because now with NIL and the transfer portal, I do believe it's kind of leveled the playing field, so upsets are going to happen more often. But we'll have to just wait and see over the next several years if that's actually true or not. But I'm still going to say just don't go too upset heavy. And then also don't have upsets going to the Final Four. That rarely ever happens. Upsets usually die in the Sweet 16 or Elite 8. One last thing I do want to say, which I found interesting in that article that I did write, was about Auburn. So since they started tracking overall #1 seeds, I'm going to say here, Auburn will not win the national title based on this stat. Because in order for a #1 overall seed to have won the national title, they also had to have had a run to at least the Final Four in the previous season. All overall #1 seeds have done that if they've won a national title.
Right.
2 of them won the national title previously, Florida and UConn, and I forget the other 2 offhand. But basically, Auburn's not going to win the title. I said it here first.
Well, Matt's standing at the water cooler telling everyone not to pick Michigan and Michigan State because he actually, I don't know, maybe that's a secret. Maybe you don't want to tell people that, so you can be the only one hanging around at the end.
Yeah, maybe. I do have one more piece of advice for people, though. I think the SEC's dominance is a little overinflated.
We're running out of time here.
It's going to
Sorry,
sound
that's going to wrap it up.
Right there
SEC graduate here.
I'm right there with you, Matt.
So this is going to sound a little conspiracy theory-y, but
That's what this is all about.
ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports, is the leader in sports commentary shows. They also happen to have the TV deals with the SEC.
They
So
do.
I think it is possible that ESPN is fueling an overinflated version of how good the SEC is. If you look at them and you just look at how high their schedules of strength are rated, they're all rated very high. But then when you go back and look at their non-conference games, you're like, I don't know if this is any harder than the other conferences have it. And I think back to, I think somebody mentioned this earlier, where we hear, oh, the Big Ten, they're so good, they're such a good conference, but they just beat each other up, and then tournament time comes, and a Big Ten team hasn't won in a quarter century.
Right.
Well, an SEC team has not won since 2012, I believe it was, with Kentucky. So.
And how much fatigue goes in through a regular season when you're facing all these powerhouses?
I think, too, when you're looking at your Georgias and Mississippi States and Oklahomas, teams that probably were seeded a lot higher than they should have been, that's where maybe you take Matt's advice and go with an upset in those couple games.
Yeah, just take that SEC hype with a grain of salt. Don't drink all the Kool-Aid.
Don't drink all the Kool-Aid. Well, good luck, everybody, filling out your bracket. Thursday, the games get going. Michigan, 10 o'clock Thursday night. Michigan State, 10 o'clock Friday night. Get your coffee, and we're going to do this again next week, see how everybody's brackets did, see how busted our brackets are.
Busted! Right.
But until then, good luck with filling out your brackets. Matt, Steven, Maddie, Blake, Jacob, have a great night, everybody.